Instacart helps you get beer and wine delivered in as fast as an hour. So, whether you need to fill the cooler for tailgate season or fill your glass for Pinot by the fire season, you can save time by getting fall sips delivered in just a few clicks. Visit instacart.com or download the app to get free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum order $10. Additional terms apply. Must be 21 or over for alcohol delivery where available. Instacart. Add life to cart.
Today on CityCast Pittsburgh, south of Schenley Park and just across the river from Page's Dairy Mart, there is a blank plot of land, currently known as Hazelwood Green, that the city, its foundations, and developers have been dreaming about for a long time. It used to be a center of industry, one of dozens of steelmaking centers along our waterways, but what it should become next, well, that is still very much up for debate. It's Monday, September 18th. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh is talking about. I'm here with some friends of the pod from Public Source, the awesome investigative reporting outlet based in Uptown. Emma Foltz, you cover higher education. Welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me.
And Eric Jankowicz, you're focused on economic development. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
We're very glad you're here. So we've been hearing for years about this plan to develop this big grassy swath of land. For a long time, it was a brownfield, so pretty tainted with the pollution from its industrial past. And it's gone by a bunch of names, most recently Almano and now Hazelwood Green, but also now Bio Valley. Can you kind of explain what's happening right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So the University of Pittsburgh is planning to build what they're calling a biomanufacturing facility on that Hazelwood Green site. And I'm not a scientist, so I don't know all that much about what biomanufacturing entails necessarily, but it is a emerging industry nationwide that they're hoping to localize right here in Pittsburgh. And, they explicitly have referenced the Hazelwood Green site's steel mill past in their sort of marketing materials about this site, saying that they want to turn Steel Valley into Bio Valley. So they're hoping that it's going to be a new prosperous industry right here in Hazelwood Green. And then CMU, on the other hand, they have some plans to build a robotics innovation center, exactly, on the site.
CMU already has something on that site. Is it the Manufacturing Futures Institute? Am I getting that right?
Yep, yeah, that's exactly it.
That's in Mill 19, right, Emma?
Yep. So Mill 19 is just, I think, a renovated shell of a steel mill that they have some new high-tech tenants in there, and CMU is one of them.
Yeah, and the robotics center, it seems like it's pretty approved by City Planning Commission, so that's kind of in the bag for them. And then on the University of Pittsburgh side, they previewed it at the last City Planning Commission meeting on September 5th. The commissioners didn't seem to have any issues with it, so in my experience, that usually means that it will pave the way for getting approval in the next time it's up.
Yeah, if they don't ask a lot of questions, that's usually a sign it's steamrolling ahead, as they say.
Yeah.
I know this land has been vacant for a really long time, and the neighborhood around it is really beautiful, but there's not a lot of reasons to visit it these days if you don't live there or know someone who does. Can either of y'all talk about maybe what Hazelwood felt like back in its heyday?
Sure. So the Jones and Laughlin steel mill operated on that Hazelwood Green site for, I want to say, about a century. And, they changed hands at the end of its life, but ultimately the plant closed in the 1990s with the collapse of the steel mill. And when the steel industry was really prosperous in Hazelwood, it was a great employer and resource in the community. I believe in the early 1960s, about 1 in 4 employees of the company lived in the neighborhood. And so when that industry went away, those jobs left the community. And in the decades since the 1990s, we've seen the neighborhood sort of wither over time, losing job opportunities that are local population.
What does the population look like these days?
Roughly 4,000 as of the 2020 census.
Compared to?
In its peak of 1960, or I don't know if it's actually the peak, but roughly 13,000 in 1960.
Which was about the peak of the Pittsburgh population generally. Of course, that had to do a lot with the steel industry. And then, okay, so the 80s come, the mills all over town close down. And then with this Hazelwood Green site, you've got a brownfield. Lots of people have proposed different ways to use it over the years. As recently as 5-10 years ago, they were talking a ton about brownfield rehabilitation, which is why I've been quietly giggling at the name Hazelwood Green. It's as if by changing the color, they think that we can just get away from what it actually is, a brown field.
Hazelwood brown.
Yeah, exactly, right.
But yeah, there have always been a ton of ideas for how to use the space over the years. Of course, there's always developers involved. I think my favorite one was during the early Almano days. They wanted to build a spinning restaurant that they said would look like it was floating over the Monongahela.
Wow.
Which was just like such a great example of like who gets to do this, though.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So now the universities have these big visions for the site. Tell me a little bit more about what exactly they want to do.
Yeah, so CMU they want to create this kind of, it's like a 15,000 square foot 3-story metal building that they want to build there, and it would have like an outdoor lab space that basically, the way it sounded, is like a kind of a robotics playground, which is like a place where students from the main campus can go there and focus specifically on kind of like actually testing the robotics that they come up with, and kind of, you know, stress test it in an outdoor space. And then there's the indoor space, which would be kind of focused on robotics research.
And then the BioForge project is specifically focusing on cell and gene therapy. But, you know, the broader Hazelwood Green site, the foundations do have plans for it more broadly. They envision the site including, I think, about 3,500 mixed income residential units and acres of recreational space, and obviously a lot of office space, retail space. That's all on the preliminary plan. So the universities have their sights on those two specific projects, but I think the foundations overall envision it being sort of a work, live, play kind of combination.
Aren't they always?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and they both emphasize sort of like, kind of, they posit themselves or position themselves as continuing the legacy of that area and the region overall, of like making things and kind of harkening back to a time where things were produced in this area, and they're sort of selling themselves as like, you know, Steel Valley 2.0, or, you know, Bio Valley, as you mentioned before. So it's just interesting how they try and connect it to the past and sort of say, you know, we're the next iteration, we're a sort of a way for the city and that particular neighborhood to revitalize. But then the question becomes, who is it being revitalized for, and what level of participation and cooperation is the surrounding neighborhood going to be involved?
The Pittsburgh Citywide Task Force on Employee Ownership was created to help businesses in the Pittsburgh region thrive and grow by bringing the message of employee ownership and its benefits to 30,000 businesses in the area. The task force was formed in conjunction with the Pennsylvania Center for Employee Ownership, the Pittsburgh City Council, Heinz Endowments, Chatham University, and the University of Pittsburgh. Employee ownership is a business model and form of succession planning that benefits owners, workers, companies, and communities alike. Interested in learning more? The task force will be holding in-person informational sessions around the Pittsburgh region. To learn more about the task force or to sign up for an informational session, please visit pghbusiness.org. That's pghbusiness.org. I don't know about you, but I am utterly devoted to a few of my favorite wardrobe staples. That said, I do not have the skills to adjust them if I shift sizes, get a tear, or just want to reimagine a classic. Old Flame mending, however, definitely does. They're a sewing service here in Pittsburgh that helps you get the most out of your clothes and keep them out of the landfill through repairs, tailoring, alterations, and even custom work. You can check them out in person in Avalon, just off Ohio River Boulevard, and look at some beautiful work samples on their Instagram at Old Flame Mending. Local pickup, delivery, and mail-in options are available, so book an appointment and find more information at oldflamemending.com. They'll fix anything but a broken heart. Emma, I'm really glad you brought up kind of the marketing materials, the messaging that's happening with all of this. Obviously, the universities are very excited, but how are Hazelwood residents feeling about some of these plans? Because I know there have been big fears in the past about gentrification, like in East Liberty. And then in Homestead, the way that that community was literally cut in half along the train tracks, like millions poured onto one side where the river is and a far, far less on the other side where most people live, which geographically is really very similar to Hazelwood Green. How are neighbors feeling this time around?
Homestead is a great example. I had one resident mention that specifically to me, that there are concerns that sort of the division between Hazelwood, the neighborhood, and Hazelwood Green, the site, will echo what's being seen in Homestead as well. So I think gentrification concerns are very prominent. There's sort of a division that we noticed, I think, within the community groups that we spoke with. You have folks like the Hazelwood Initiative, which is the local neighborhood organization that is working with Pitt and collaborating with them on specifically community engagement efforts in the neighborhood. But then you have groups such as Poor Law, which is led by Sandra Cole McCamey and Pastor Lushua Love, who are both long-term residents in the neighborhood, that had more of a critical perspective on Hazelwood development as a whole, but as it also relates to those development projects, in the sense that, you know, they believe that developers have often come into the community and proposed projects that are not necessarily in the neighborhood's best interests. Hazelwood for years has lacked a full-service grocery store that Poor Law actually got some approval to build sort of a co-op version of that. And that has been something that the community has really pushed for, has come up a lot as sort of a deficit in the neighborhood.
Yeah, because the nearest thing is Giant Eagle, which is like a mile plus away.
Although I saw they got a La Gourmandine, which, I mean, I love their pastry, but it seems like a weird fit for the neighborhood when you can't pick up milk and bread.
Right, especially that it's taking the place of what was a former grocery store. And then you have people like Terry Shields, founder of Jada House International, which caters to I think specifically teenage women, but all at-risk teens as well. And she has sort of a realistic kind of between those two groups that Emma laid out, that this is going to come. We might as well try and get ours if we can and make as many demands of them as we can.
But also, to be fair, you know, some people did see the promise of the site, and
absolutely,
either residents or elected officials. I spoke with City Councilor Barb Warwick for this piece, and her perspective was that this has great potential for infusing jobs and providing for some prosperity in the neighborhood, as long as the developers are really intentional about looping in residents and making sure that they have access to them. And when I did some door knocking, I did speak to some younger residents, actually, an 18-year-old and a 20-year-old as well, who did not know all that much about the Hazelwood Green site, but heard robotics and thought that that was interesting, or that just saw the site as a way to revitalize their neighborhood. So it's not all, you know, negativity as well, or a sense that it's not something the neighborhood needs. But I think people who have been really attuned to development in the neighborhood and have, you know, seen Hazelwood change over the decades really feel like the universities and the developers need to be really cognizant about how they're engaging with the community in this.
A lot of the people I spoke with, they didn't know what was going on there, and they were just so caught up in their daily lives of trying to just like make ends meet that they didn't even really have time to engage, even if they wanted to or knew about it. Most of them didn't know about it that I spoke to, which is totally anecdotal, but that was just my experience.
Exactly.
So what are Pitt and CMU doing, or what are they saying that they'll do to try to address some of these fears?
I will say that Pitt in particular has outlined a pretty extensive community engagement process. They have a whole webpage dedicated to their efforts in Hazelwood. And when I spoke with administrators, they said that they have met 30 times with the community since July of 2022, and this was in early August. So about 30 times in a year, and are looking for opportunities to connect youth with STEM education opportunities, seeing that as a pathway to create job opportunities on this biomanufacturing site potentially. They're also looking at employment opportunities currently for residents.
Yeah, because they say there's going to come a lot of job growth with this. Some part-time construction jobs or temporary, but also some longer-term ones that I've heard they say are going to be available for community college graduates in the neighborhood. I'm always skeptical of that when they say stuff like that.
Well, I mean, even if they were totally genuine and were willing to do that, I think it was Terry Shields, Emma, who pointed out to us that a lot of the people that live there aren't even at a level where they have a community college degree or even a high school degree. So it's kind of like, I think she was wondering if even if they are going to be true to that promise, like how would they actually get there, because the area has been so disinvested that you even to bring them to a baseline of being able to like get training to work at these high tech facilities, you need to like put in a bunch of effort on that front end.
Well, and even just basics, like recruiting for that sort of thing. Like I think with Pitt and CMU specifically, so often, they have this established practice of posting their jobs, their positions online, which is fine for white collar work. I think most people are used to that. But unless they're like intentionally advertising within the community that we want you to work here in a way that people are actually going to see it, I can imagine that folks would maybe miss the chance just because they don't know that that's available to them, that this is where you go for that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know what biomanufacturing entails. So you see this opportunity and you might have a lot of questions or just not know that it's something that you would be even able to be a part of or be qualified to do. And that was something that I think Pitt is trying to tackle, is to like inform the residents about what exactly they're planning on doing and what does it mean to be doing biomanufacturing work in this area. But that I think is another issue. But Pitt has created 3 specific committees, most of which I believe have representation from community orgs to tackle this kind of community engagement issue. CMU, on the other hand, does not seem to have a super public facing, by means like I don't believe they have a webpage for all of their community engagement efforts, but they said that they have had meetings with residents and they plan to offer like a workshop on technology training for senior citizens, for example, and have partnered for some STEM programming for youth as well. So they say that they're engaging with the community, but Pitt has really come out with a specific process and timeline for that work.
Yeah. Well, is it any of it working? Is it helping? Are people feeling better?
I think some organizations really value the work that if they are like the Hazelwood Initiative. Sonia Talman, who's the executive director, she spoke positively about her efforts to engage with both Pitt and CMU. So I think some organizations feel like they are having a seat at the table and are engaging with the universities. But I think, other residents said they didn't know much about what was happening on the site, and that included the folks at Poor Law who are established community voices who have been involved in development. So I think it's still kind of a toss-up.
Yeah. So what happens next, from groundbreakings potentially to just continuing these conversations with residents?
Well, groundbreaking is expected as early as this fall, with potential housing going in next year as well. And yeah, the other one is the City Planning Commission approving the bioforge facility. Yeah, and then it's green light all the way.
Yeah, and both projects, the Pitt project is expected to be completed in 2027, and the CMU robotics is in 2025, I believe. So in the next couple of years, I think the Hazelwood Green site is going to really change a lot.
Emma Foltz and Eric Jankowitz are reporters for Public Source. Thank you both so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Megan.
That's all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. We hope that you'll visit our new website. We got a new one. It's sparkly, it's fresh. It's got everything, our entire podcast backlog, everything we publish in our Hey Pittsburgh newsletter. You should always subscribe, of course. But if there's ever anything you missed and you want to go back and check it out, it's all there. It's pittsburgh.citycast.fm. If you're liking the show, please leave us a nice review, a nice rating. We always look at them and we appreciate them. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Talk to you soon.
It's called Hazelwood Green now, and it seems like that's always like a first indication that a neighborhood is changing in some way, and who got to name it is interesting as far as like ownership and a sense of who it belongs to.